Hi. Okay, so now built-in functions. We will cover very basic, simple built-in functions. Of course, there are many more. You will learn them along the course, but we really wanted to give you an introduction to functions in this notebook, because it's easier to understand everything else in programming in Python, and it's much easier also to create understandable and efficient exercises for you when you know already what a function is, even at a basic level. The function we'll look at, the built-in function we'll look at are int, float, and str. So you might notice already that these functions have exactly the same names as the data types we have discussed at the end of the previous notebook. And it's not a coincidence. The function int basically takes an argument and, if possible, tries to return the same argument but as a type integer. Float tries to convert an argument into float, so into a rational number, floating point number, and string tries to convert an argument into string. So let's look at an example. The best example is int, because this function changes the most. So imagine we have a float number 24 point something something. Then I run function int on it, and I assign the result again in x. So if I run this example, I get 24. So I got an integer because there is no dot, no comma after the no dot after the numbers. But what might surprise you is that Python is not rounding up or down. It simply just discards the part which was after the dot. So let's look maybe at a simple example. Let's look at int 15, no variable, simply just a constant which is equal 15 6.78. If we look at this, we as humans, we would round this up to 16. Python won't do it. It will simply discard the part after dot and it will give us 15. So this is the result of this function. So how do you think about what is the result of the function? Well, we've already defined many functions in the previous videos, and we had this return part. So this return part was returning as the result of the function. So this function was written by someone. There is some code inside, and at the end of this code there is return part, and after this return part there is some code which some variable which returns as this value 15, right? And this is why this function allows us to convert for instance floating point numbers into integers. And this is exactly the same how the other functions work. So for instance, if right now my x is equal 24, so my x is integer, and I can convert it into a float. So when I convert it into float, I can see that my x is not written by Python by like 24 and that's all, but 24.0. There is actually, we've already seen, there is a way to check what is type of x, and this is a function called type. It also takes one argument, and I can check what is the type of my variable x, for instance. Well, let's see, so the type of this variable is int. And you might think, okay, why it is int? I just called function float on this variable, and so it should have been changed into float type. Well, no, because this function takes as input my argument x, and it returns as a result the result of conversion into float. So it has returned 24.0, so 24 float type value, but Python haven't saved this anywhere, and my variable x still has a value 24, which is integer. If I want to change this, I can see that x is still 24. If I want to change this, I have to call float and then save the result of this function into x. If I do this in this way, I can see that 24 is already written with 24.0, and I can check that type of x is now float. Okay, so I hope this example helps you understand even better what does it mean for a function to return something. The function returns something, there is a result, but if you want to store this result, we have to store it in some variable. This result doesn't just magically is not just magically saved when we would like it to be saved. So we have to be very specific when we want to, for Python to save something. So the last function which we haven't discussed is str function, so the function which converts to strings. This function is useful if we, for instance, want to add numbers to strings. Basically, usually when we want to do this is we want to display, we have a string which describes a number and we want to display this number. So if we do it like this, we have already seen that this causes errors because Python doesn't know how to add strings and integers. So we can use str function, which will convert our number into string. This can be either integer number or a float number, and then since the result of this function is already a string, Python knows how to add two strings. It simply puts them together, and we get a string which is number of apples colon 14. In the next video, we will talk about a final example of a function which uses a built-in function inside to create some output which is of interest to us. So thank you for your attention and see you in the next video.